Alright, yeah, let's go ahead and keep this. It's not our best hand because we've only got one blue source, and so we're not sure if we can cast this Whirler Rogue, but we've got lands, we've got spells, and we are on the draw. This hand would be significantly better on the play, but it looks like our opponent's probably playing some type of ramp deck because we see Shrine and we see a Deathcap Cultivator. So we've got a choice between Dustwatch Recruiter and Lambholt Pacifist. And I think we want to just start on Lambholt Pacifist. But if our opponent's got a nice draw with a ramp spell, that's pretty bad news actually for us. And it is Nissa's Pilgrimage for our opponent. So I think we just want to pass here to get our pacifist flipped. And if we want to, we can actually just go ahead and main phase this Bounding Crisis to tap the Deathcap Cultivator. But not sure that's what we want to do. Yeah, we'll just let our opponent draw. We're not too sure what we're up against. So there's also not that many 6 mana cards most ramp decks play. So yeah, it's just our opponent's just passing here. So we're gonna play the Krasis to tap the Cultivator. And this does mean we're setting up for a 7-point swing on our turn. So yeah, let's go ahead and start by attacking. And I think we want to just follow up with this Oath of Nissa. We are just going to grab this land here. And this time around, we are just going to tap this Deathcap Cultivator immediately with our Bounding Crisis, because we're worried about a card like World Breaker being cast this turn. And if we are able to keep our opponent off of playing something like a World Breaker this turn, we're able to just win. And you see our opponent's just conceding. So on to the next game against a ramp deck. That was a pretty quick one. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more of an interesting game this time around. But versus ramp, it's kind of like either they kill you quickly or they don't really do anything a lot of the time. So moving to the sideboard, we're going to cut the Nissas and board in Surrak because we want to put a bunch of pressure on our opponent. So we can board in these negates just to have more counter magic and take out the Jace Unravelers. Are not the most impressive here. We could also board in some stuff to mess with our opponent's creatures because we did see at least one Mana Dork out of our opponent. I think I like the Stratus Dancer here as well. So the Dustwatch Recruiter can be a little bit slow in this matchup. We might actually just want 2 Unravelers and 2 Recruiters. And yeah, let's try this. If we see more Mana Dorks, then we may want to board in some actual creature removal, but this hand is fine. We're going to keep it, but we would like to draw more lands, obviously, and then we also don't have counter magic in our hand, so it's not great, but it's like one of those borderline hands where I think you keep it, but we might just not get there at all. And there's a Sylvan Advocate, so it looks like our opponent is actually playing a variety of creatures. We drew a counterspell, but we're still missing our lands here. And our opponent's Advocate could get big pretty quickly. So we drew a land, but it actually comes into play tapped. So I think we just want to go ahead and play these Lambholt Pacifists and hope to flip them pretty soon. It could be that our opponent doesn't have anything to play, but unfortunately there is the explosive vegetation, so it looks like this game our opponent's draw is a little bit better and ours is a little bit worse. So the question now becomes, do we want to just hold up Spell Shrivel, or we could play Sirach, but that just seems pretty greedy, so we're going to flip our Pacifists and hold up the Spell Shrivel here, just because we're afraid of a card like Worldbreaker coming down. And there's a Seagate Wreckage. That's a pretty interesting one from our opponent. So it looks like our opponent did not have something like a Worldbreaker, so this play ended up not working out as well as we wanted it to. Although we are going to get to counter this Sylvan Advocate, I guess. So that's not too bad. And it does mean that these pacifists are once again going to flip. And this turn, since we have two Sirachs, I don't mind just playing one. And we're going to give it haste. We can actually, if we want to, attack with all of our creatures. It's a pretty close spot, but I think since we have a second Sirach, we just attack with our one Sirach and trade it for our opponent's Sylvan Advocate. And here's Ulamog, so this is pretty bad for us. And it looks like our opponent's just going straight for our lands. So I don't think we're going to be able to do much here about this Ulamog. We can flip our Butchers. But once the Ulamog comes in, it's going to be tough. And there's an Atarka, so we're just going to go ahead and go to game 3 here. We know our opponent has more Mana Dorks, so I actually think we want these Anchor to the Aethers in our deck. Besides that, I think we've got a pretty good configuration for this matchup. That draw obviously did not pan out the way we wanted it to. Whirler Rogue can be a little bit slow as well. And the Unraveler of Secrets, yeah. We may just want to cut a couple of the Jaces, big Jace. Though it does bounce mana creatures, which is kind of relevant. Alright, let's try this. We'll try this configuration. And we're on the play, so... Wow, okay, this draw isn't what we were looking for. I think we just keep it and hope to draw a creature. We have a bunch of creatures in our deck. We can pretty much counter whatever our opponent's doing for a little while. So as long as we draw some threats, I think we'll be fine. So there's a Surok. We don't have the double green for it yet, but we've still got plenty of time before we're going to need it. It looks like our opponent does have a Sylvan Advocate, so I think we just want to go ahead and Clash of Wills for 1 here. It's interesting that Shrine was the land our opponent actually played here. Sometimes that indicates that our opponent could be light on lands, so it's definitely something to be aware of. And here's Oath of Nissa. I think we actually want to cast this, even though it means we are not going to be able to have Spell Shrivel mana up for this turn. And we've got an option between lands and Bound and Krasis. I think we want the Krasis as another threat. And hopefully our opponent just plays something that we can negate this turn. Could be... Okay, Jedi Offshoot is not something we can negate. That's a pretty peculiar one. But our plan's just going to be to play Bound and Krasis into Surok, depending on what our opponent casts. So it's actually going to be a Tireless Tracker. So we could counter this if we wanted to with Spell Shrivel, but that would mean we wouldn't get to play our Bound and Krasis this turn. So it's a pretty close call. But I think we just want to counter it and try to keep our opponent off of having... This could be a big creature on the board that can block our Surok, can block our Bound and Krasis, and it also gives our opponent some card advantage. And now we have Bound and Krasis plus negate, so if our opponent does play something we needed to negate here, we could, but it looks like nothing's getting cast, so we're just gonna play our Bound and Krasis, tap this Jedi Offshoot, and now I like just playing the island so that we have negate still up rather than playing the Lumbering Falls. And we're going to play Surok. And this is going to be a big swing for us. So if our opponent has something like Explosive Vegetation, we would just counter it. But it looks like our opponent did not have anything, and that's just going to be the match here.